Well, business giving is something that every single one of you is involved with. And we wanted to talk about business giving today, but not just um, giving in general. So many times we get questions, but I have so many different things I'm asking businesses for. How can we be more efficient with that? So we want to deep dive into that a little bit. So we'll talk just a little bit about at the high level about what business donors might be looking for, and then we'll talk about how can we try to structure and ask so we're not going back more, right? I think any donor, whether it's individuals or businesses, really appreciates when we value their time, and when we have done our homework in advance. So we want to try and talk through this so that we can be proactive moving into the future. So with that, next slide, please, Trish. So, I think it's important to look at priorities for the business donor because they're looking at the financial situation in a very different way, both as a human, but also as the stewards of the business's philanthropic and marketing dollars. So oftentimes they're going to ask the question much more than an individual is in what's in it for me, what's in it for the business, also what's in it selfishly for the individual leaders of the business, because we know that oftentimes they're looking at opportunities to entertain clients, entertain people who are important to their organization, their employees, things like that. So I think it's always important to remember that that's a priority. We have to make sure that we're showcasing not only what good they're doing for the community and impacting, but what's also in it for the business. We need to link the giving to their business goals, doing our homework, checking out their mission statement, their vision, who their board of directors is, who is the decision makers, and what their goals are as a business is very important. Because oftentimes we're able to look at a piece of our campaign or a piece of our organization for them to focus on because it aligns with what their business goals are. And kind of in that same vein, supporting quality of life projects to enhance their corporate image for their employees and customers is super important too, right? And so many of us are in the realm of health and education, and those do oftentimes find a place on their list. Anything that relates to families and children is also something that's oftentimes important to them. But they're also looking at participating in projects that make a measurable difference, right? Business leaders are going to be much more focused on metrics, performance, impact, and those are important to know as you're having a conversation with a potential business donor. They're looking for organizations that use volunteer time of their top people effectively. One of the things in trying to get business leaders on our business gifts teams is we know that we want to go to the top person oftentimes, and sometimes they say, "Hey, well, you can have my marketing coordinator on your team," and we're like, "But we want the CEO." They're much more likely to get involved with our organization if we have a reputation for being the organization that uses people's time effectively. And that's why it's so important from the get-go to train and orient and equip your volunteer teams so that they don't say, "Oh, I sit on that board," but they say, "Hey, I am actively involved in fundraising for this organization and I'm passionate about it because this reason." So we want to make sure that we're using volunteer time effectively so that they are willing to get involved. The people who have super busy schedules are willing to get involved. Recognition, visibility, and stewardship are key. I think that it goes without saying that, they oftentimes have to look at things from a marketing perspective. So recognition of their business in a way that's going to be positive PR and marketing in a visible way is important. But the stewardship piece is also important. We're dealing with people who make decisions about their businesses. And so we cannot forget about the stewardship component with business donors as well. So moving on to the next slide, if we have kind of keeping all of those things in mind about the driving motivations for supporting an organization from a business perspective, I wanted to kind of break it down into sponsorships versus a campaign or a project, a giving club ask. Sponsorships are generally driven by marketing and recognition. They're looking for those tangible benefits, the things on a list. You get your name here, your logo here, the opportunity to do XYZ cool thing, X number of tickets to the sponsorship event that you have solicited them for, and they're looking at it from that lens. So always be prepared with a sponsorship ask with what they get. Now, on the Giving Club side of things, they're going to hopefully be looking at this, and you're going to be presenting it much more from the charitable intent and the impact-driven lens, right? Oftentimes, they're like, look, I want to make sure that 100% of my gift is going to the cause. I want to have the greatest impact possible. I want to know that real people in my community are being impacted. And so making sure that we have that as part of the ask is very important. I think the connections are even more important in a campaign or giving club ask, because there's not as much what's in it for me. It's much more about the feeling, the cause, the people that are asking and making a difference and being part of the group. Just last night, a friend of mine texted my husband asking if his business would support a fundraiser event. And I was like, what organization is it for? He's like, I don't know. I was like, honestly, I don't really care. She asked you, people give to people that they know and trust. I think you should consider it because she's a friend. And I said it just organically, but I was like, whoa, that's so true, right? And it was a business gift, but it was about the connection and the relationship to the decision maker as well. So I think we have to recognize that. But at the end of the day, recognition is also important in the campaign ask. So making sure that we are doing something that's meaningful, whether it's a check presentation, whether it's that recognition item that they're proudly displaying in their place of employment to show their employees that they've made that decision on behalf of the business. Those things are very, very important. So how do we determine who might give to us? I think it's oftentimes that we're like, well, we have a great list of like 10 businesses, but we're a small community and we really don't think there's hardly anybody else that might consider. Every community, regardless of how big or how small, every one of you has tremendous opportunity in the business world. But we got to do our research. We got to find who are previous donors to our organization. That's a great place to start. It's, who do we do business with as an organization? Looking at our organizational family, our vendors, those people that utilize our services, absolutely a place to go. We got to look at those people and determine their business affiliations to start with. Or we look at the businesses that we do business with, vendors. That question is asked oftentimes, how do I get my vendors involved? And it's so important to take a look at them and get those lists. But it also comes down to, the people who are the decision makers, the people within your organizations who have the relationships with them, and connecting back and being willing to be a part of your team. Your program utilizers, right? If you're a healthcare organization, what businesses are you seeing employees of a lot? You should be able to get that information. If you're another type of organization, who is coming into your place of work and utilizes your services? You are doing work in your community and you need to look at those people. They're a part of your organizational family who have been impacted in some way, shape, or form, and that's a great place to start. Getting those lists. I attended an event in Savannah and I pulled out, holy cow, look at this list. I was at an event. So who else is giving to other charities, right? We've got a list right here of prospects. We know that they made a choice to make a charitable gift to another charity. So why not us, right? I think that's always a great place to look, looking at websites, looking at printed materials from places that might be part of our constituency. They didn't give away their last money, so they're a great prospect as well. Obviously, our committee members, we know that our committee members in all places, let's say they're on our annual gifts committee and they're helping to build our annual gifts program, but they own a business, or guess what? They also work at a business. So any introductions that people can make, regardless of if they're on your business gifts team or your special event team to work on sponsorship asks, those are a great place to find new prospects and new connections as well. So don't leave any stone unturned. Looking for members to join your business gifts team, I always say it's great to look at businesses who do business with other businesses, right? The business to business place is a good place to start because they're leveraging relationships with other businesses. So that's always something to keep in mind if you're looking to grow your team as well. On to the next slide. Just, keeping that vein of, okay, who might we look to? Now, how much can we expect businesses to give? How do we even begin to know where to start? And that's obviously always a tricky one. But I think you can take some past information to try and help land you in the right ballpark of your ask, right? Again, previous giving to any charity. As I sat in that event I attended this week, I was like, wow, they're the presenting sponsor. I wonder how much that cost. And it was clear that this organization had given a big sum of money for that. But as we went through the event, I was also intrigued by the recognition, because that presenting sponsor essentially got kind of a little commercial, but that tied in an impactful way to the cause. So that organization did a really great job of custom the recognition to make it very meaningful, and probably really maximized the dollar amount that presenting sponsor had given. And it was not a sponsor that I would have ever thought would be willing and able to give at a high level, but they probably leveraged some marketing dollars with that. So kind of back to that, don't write off anyone as hey, they're not a big enough business, or no, they're not local enough, they're too corporate. If you see them giving to other charities, kind of do your homework and figure out where you might be able to find a place for them that's meaningful and that can help maximize their giving. We need to relate to the compelling need of the projects. Again, this was it was funding the transportation fund for the United Way, this particular event, and this was a auto dealership, and they connected it to the compelling need in a really, really great way. So I thought that was a good example, again, and how they were able to maximize that. But we also need to relate to the organization's goal for the project. You always hear us talk about, if you just go out there and kind of blindly raise money, you're going to raise some money. But if you have a goal with a specific project, a higher goal, you can make a larger ask, right? Let's say that you can ask a business for $1 million, but you only have $1 million goal. They're going to laugh at you. They're going to say, I'm not going to fund your entire project. But if you have a $25 million goal and you have $1 million ask to a very, capable potential prospect, that is a very reasonable ask. And so you do have to take into consideration the goal for your project when you're figuring out how much to ask your business prospects for. So now that we've kind of painted the picture and gotten ourselves in the business giving mindset, I'd like to hand it over to Shauna to talk a little bit more about making sure that we are being efficient with our time as we craft an ask, and looking at all of the ways that this particular business might be able to support your organization.
Thank you, Marty. I think business giving is oftentimes who I see clients struggle with the most in terms of the concept of turning them maybe from what they have been into what our goals are for them as organizations. And that being that a lot of us come from very event-driven organizations whenever we are entering into building these robust fundraising programs, right? And so, how do we take a business from someone who has historically given in this very small area, and that's how they like to support the organization, to being able to encourage them to be big partners with us. Especially for community members and business members and our committee members and all that, I oftentimes see that be very confusing. So I think that this will be helpful in terms of looking at the scope of how we want for businesses to support us. And so that means that we need to really look at all the opportunities that we give them, all of the opportunities that are on the table, and then maybe making some hard decisions even as to, do we need all of these on the table for them to be able to choose from? We've all been in a situation, I'm sure, where a business says, I just gave you $100 for my tea sign at the golf outing. I'm not, that I gave for the year. So I'm not really interested in doing anything else. And you think, holy moly. And sometimes it wasn't even you that asked for the $100 for the tea sign. And, this hand doesn't know what this hand is doing. So this is really important to sit down and look through all of the ways that we want for businesses to give to us. Do they make sense? And how do we package that for them to be able to kind of look through? One of our clients uses a great term for this, a menu, for them to look at and determine how they want to support us. So fundraising events for the entire year. And I would encourage you to include all of your fundraising events, not just the foundations, because sometimes we know that other departments or units or educational wings or whoever it is, there can be fundraisers going on all over the place. Hopefully there's not. Hopefully you have your finger on the pulse of that, but there can be things going on all over the place. So are they being hit up for lots of different things at lots of different times? Get that on a map, get that scheduled out, and figure out what that looks like. Are we giving them volunteer opportunities? Is this a way for, and there are some organizations in the towns where I'm from where they are required to volunteer. It's a part of their jobs in terms of some of the different businesses here where they are looking for, they will volunteer for events. They will offer up manpower. They will, because they're wanting to teach their people to be better human beings, really, better stewards of our community. So are we providing volunteer opportunities for them? Is that important to them? In-kind requests across the organization. Again, I would encourage you to really make sure that you have a firm grasp on, if it's not coming out of your office, is it coming out of any other offices? Is anyone else asking for them for in-kind requests across your organization? Are they being asked to do a gift basket for this fundraiser and you're asking them for this, or whatever that looks like? The business gifts club ask. So this comes back to the, campaign gifts. We're trying to work on growing them into a big gift. What is their capacity? What are they really able to do? How are they really able to make an impact? What does that look like? I love these last two, payroll deduction through business and business employees engaging in employee giving on your organization's behalf. Think United Way. We have seen some really great organizations allow for you to come in and talk to them. I'm just going to use the example of cancer care. We know that this issue is very prevalent in this community. We happen to know that a lot of you are receiving cancer care. Your families are receiving cancer care. You are a survivor. We are providing this service. We want for this to be local. Would you all consider giving out of your payroll, out of your checks, to be part of what we're doing? Very similar to what the United Way does, right? But if we are able to do that, go in and have those conversations. That is a powerful way to get advocates in the community and also to generate more financial support. Even better if you can take it one step forward and say, okay, company XYZ, your employees have committed to this. Will you match it, or will you double it, or whatever that looks like? Get a little competition going there. Next slide, please, Trish. It's always important once you've made this pitch, right? And this is, it needs to be really well crafted whenever you're sitting down with these executives, or you're sitting down with whoever is in charge of it, to include all of those pieces that we just talked through. Okay, so out of this menu, we think that these 4 fit this company really well. We're going to present this to them. That you have a letter of an intent, a gift form, a pledge form, to include everything in one place. And the reason why that's so important is because these people have day jobs, right? and they are sitting down with you and giving you their undivided attention and deciding how your organizational goals and their organizational goals can pair and move forward together and how they can help you. And then when you walk out of that office, guaranteed they don't remember half of what they, specifics are. How did that work again? What did we say here? Especially when it gets convoluted, not convoluted in an intentional way, but it gets more complicated as we are building these packages together, with the hope to be able to engage them more, with the hope that they feel more involved, with the hope that they feel like they're part of our family. But it's also a little more intricate, right? So we make it as easy as possible. Our job as fundraisers is to make giving as easy as possible to us, right? We don't ever want anybody guessing unless they're guessing in the wrong way and they, for whatever reason say, well, I think we said 1 billion, right? And it was actually 1 million. That would be delightful. And maybe you wouldn't want a letter of intent in that position because they forgot in the wrong way. But we want to be able to clearly put that in them and be able to follow through with them. So next slide, please, Trish. Okay, so this is a really great example of an organization who was in that space that we talked about earlier, where they fundraised basically based on a golf outing. And that was what their community was used to in terms of businesses giving. And they're trying to change this concept from you sponsor the golf outing every year to how can you come alongside of us and help us with this Together campaign. This is specifically a campaign to renovate their ER. So I had a play on the words together there. So this is a fantastic piece. Their chair, Jack Graham, he wrote a piece in there. He actually got a nurse to give him her handwritten little note there that you can see in there. And this helps. The brochure helps for businesses to sit down and say, okay, well, I still get all this stuff. I get even more stuff than I used to just sponsoring the golf tournament. And this, I believe, was a 3 or a 5 year pledge. I'm not entirely sure, but so this is what I still get. I'm giving my gift. It's bigger. I've stretched a bit, but I also get to be included in these giving clubs and all these other different pieces. And it's right in front of me. I can see it. It's tangible. I know what's happening. I know Jack. I want to be involved in this. These recognition levels are attractive to me. It talks through, how it's important to my business. I'm able to make the connection that my employees are getting care in this ED. I'm able to, then say to our employees, we're supporting this. We know this is important to you. So this is a really great way that this organization knew that they needed to adjust from the going to businesses and them saying, I give to your golf outing. Okay, well, we're asking you to continue giving to our golf outing, but we're asking you to stretch. We're asking you to get bigger. And this is what we believe in. And I love that last line there. I believe 100% in this campaign. His leadership allowed for them to be able to sit down with businesses and to be able to make those transformational gifts, right? So, okay, thank you. Next slide, please, Trish. And then after you've sat down with them, you've said, we would love for you to be our lead sponsor. We would love for you to join us at that naming opportunity level. We would love to be able to have company XYZ on the whatever, maybe it's a farming company. We'd love to have you on the decontamination unit. We'd love to have your name there. I've done that before. That's why I said that. And that's fascinating how people are interested in stuff like that. But we'd love to have that. Here are all the benefits that you get that are on this lovely brochure. And then they say, you know what, that's a stretch for us, but I think that makes sense. It makes financial sense. We're already kind of doing that. We're just adding a little bit. And what a great opportunity to have our name on that. So we've successfully sat down, had that conversation with them. We want this letter of intent, right? And you would want your letter of intent to mirror your brochure that you're using. You would want it to have the same feel and all of that, but this is the nitty gritty as to what you want on there. And this is so powerful because, again, the person that you're sitting down with, more than likely, unless it's a small business, and that's completely fine, but the person that you're sitting down with more than likely isn't the one who's cutting the check. And so if they are making the pledge payment on an annual basis or whatever it is, this is just as useful for the organization as it is for you. you want to be able to remember too, because hopefully you're making 100 of these asks a week, right? And you're not going to be able to keep them all straight. So you need this to be able to tell you, yes, they pledged in at this. They said that they needed 5 years to be able to do it that way. We prefer 3, but they really needed 5 and they were able to stretch a little bit. So we put that here. This is how long they want to be able to pay it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your database manager should be making sure that they are plugging that in so that they're getting pledge reminders, all that fun stuff. And then, of course, you need to be focused on the stewardship on the other side of it. So with that, I am going to turn it back to the marvelous Marty. Wait, is this me? Marty, this is you, right? Yes.
Yeah, no, this is me. Thank you, Shauna. Appreciate it. Yeah, so, we wanted to just kind of let's think about the actual ask and what a business gift ask might look like, and what are some of the key things that we can do to set ourselves up to get the best possible outcome, of the most possible support in a meaningful way that gives the business recognition, that gives your organization the support that you want. And how we can do that. So I think the first important thing is determining the connector to set an in-person meeting. I think that oftentimes we're dealing with businesses. There's multiple different layers. We have relationships with some people, but we know people who know people. You have a lot more players, right? An individual family ask, there's like a decision maker, it's the person, right? But with a business, there's a lot of different ways you can go. You have to think, do we need to sit down with the top person, or do we need to sell it to someone under them first, because they're going to sit down with us longer and then they can sell it on our behalf? We have to figure out who we need to meet with. But then we also have to determine who the best connector is to get that meeting set. Someone who has a relationship, who they know and trust, all the things that we know. Someone who they're not going to just put us off. We've got to determine that. Then we have to determine the best team for the ask. It may be a different person. One gets us in the door, but we know that, gosh, this is the CFO we're going to have to sit down with. I better find someone who can really speak to numbers and answer those tough questions. I need to bring someone in my organization. Or we might say, hey, we know this person has had some sort of a connection to our organization. I got to have a really great storyteller with me. I got to have someone in the room that can build rapport. Again, just like every ask, we want to determine the best team for the ask based on who we're sitting down with. This is one of my favorite ones. Resist the urge to make an ask via email. I cannot tell you how many times professionally I have been said, oh, just send me an email and I'll take a look at what you're talking about. Like when you're on the phone asking for the meeting, and they're busy. I get that, but do not allow them to put you off via email, because you're not going to get what you really could get if you had the opportunity to sit down. Oftentimes businesses are like, yeah, but we do it every year and just send us the information and we'll do it. And again, you're never going to expand their giving. You're never going to deepen that relationship if you just kind of say, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and send you that. I've done it before. I've made that mistake. I know that we can do more. And I think you have to, when you're making an ask, you have to set up a meeting. Virtual, second choice, obviously, but in person, obviously the best option. Again, just to kind of recap what Shauna went into, we got to address and acknowledge all of the opportunities for support in the same meeting. It may be that you don't have control over some other departments or initiatives that are happening that your organization benefits from, and that's okay. But I think it's important to acknowledge, and kind of from an educational perspective, look, I know you get asked for things for the bake sale that the, this whatever XYZ group puts on, and that's so appreciated, but that really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm here to talk about today, because we're talking about something bigger. I think it's just important to acknowledge if it's something that's out of your control. Or, hey, we want to get someone from your organization, hopefully you, involved in a big way. We want you to be a partner. And like Shauna used that word, like when we're talking with businesses, it's more about like a partnership for the community than it is a solicitation for a gift. That's how it becomes a relationship versus a transaction. So I think it's just important not only to try and craft the ask where you're asking for the things that you're looking for from a multi-year or at least for the entire year perspective, but it's also important to address and acknowledge that there are other things happening and that that's not what you're there to talk about, but that you know it's appreciated in general. Next slide, please. Obviously, customizing and personalizing the ask, we've got to think about what's in it for them and craft the ask accordingly. I was having a conversation the other day about an organization who's been presenting sponsor of a gala for a long time. It's kind of a blended ask, a personal and business, because oftentimes business leaders are small business owners, or they are their business, right? And then they're like, we're looking to shift now to support for a campaign. And so there's the side of the parent company and the individual kind of independent contractor, but yet they've been doing this sponsorship, and they seem upset about things sometimes and complain about how and when they're named. And I was like, look, might be time to go back to the drawing board and ask them what's important to them. Find out, and if you can do it, especially if you look at that signature gifts level, whether it's a sponsorship or an organizational support for a campaign ask, if you're at that $50,000 plus level, you sure have some flexibility to customize something. And maybe you thought that everything that was on that list that you get that Shauna just showed in a couple slides back, maybe you thought that was what was important to them, but they're like, no, that's important to me. Here's what I want. And if you can do it and you can customize it, that makes it so much more meaningful. So think about how you can be creative, how you can hear them out and do something that really matters to them. Again, strive for that multi-year commitment, but realistically, you have to recognize that they have budget cycles and organizational giving policies. So it's great to have that, hey, we make our asks, they're pledges for the campaign, and we sure hope that we can, get a multi-year commitment. But we also have to recognize some businesses just are not set up to do that. So you may have to go year to year and build on their giving year over year. So you have to be flexible with that, but always strive for that multi-year commitment. You got to determine the decision-making process and discuss the follow-up timeline and channels. It may be as easy as, the CEO saying, yes, I can do this today. There may be a board involved. There may be an executive leadership team. There may be any number of next steps that have to happen. But just like any ask, the most important thing at the end is to determine what that follow-up timeline is. I used to always say something like, I know that it's my job to follow up, and I do not want to be an annoyance to you. I really don't, but it's my job to follow up. So I want to talk about what that looks like so we're on the same page, because I don't want you to run the other direction from me when I see you, but I want to make sure that we get this done in a timely fashion and what's something that works for you. Should we set up another meeting? Should we set up a phone call? How's next Tuesday? That's too soon. Okay, what about next month? What does this look like? Now you're going to have to talk to your board to talk to about this. When's your next board meeting? Asking those types of questions and putting it out there on that you are a follow-up person, you're professional, you're there to get something done, but you don't want to be an annoyance. And there's nothing worse than feeling like, gosh, that was a good meeting. They were all on board and they said they're going to get back to me. And dang, in their mind, was that a day, a week, a year? We don't know. We don't know what the expectation is. So make sure that we have that expectation for follow-up. We agree on it. We have that next step. It makes it so much easier. But then we also got to follow through on our follow-up. Sometimes we've got so many asks out, we're juggling so many balls, and we just forget to follow up because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if we're going to be proactive and we're going to set a next follow-up step, we have to follow through on it ourselves as well. So with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions that anyone has. I think we are still in our time, right about bumping up on that 11:45 time, but I would love to entertain any questions that anyone might have today. Any research about the success of 3-year cycle gift versus 5 years? I don't have specific research on that, but I can just say from experience that getting a 5-year commitment from a business, extremely difficult. It's just that much longer out into the future. Look at these last couple of years, a great example of how things happen. And most business leaders recognize that they have to be definitive in decision making, but getting much past a 3-year commitment from a business especially is really challenging. I find that even past 1 year sometimes is tough as you're doing a culture shift. 2 years is a good starting point. Sometimes if you're like, hey, we've always been, again, if you're working from, we used to always do annual events, building them to a couple of years is a great place, but 3 years is that sweet spot, I think, where you should be focused. Let's see, I see there's another one and it just went off my screen. On the example you showed, did you mention that you were asking for golf as well as a naming opportunity? I didn't see anything on there about golf. Shauna, I think that's directed to you.
Yeah, so that that example that we showed it included the golf on it. So if they gave at the $50,000 level, thank you, Trish. See if you see that platinum. Platinum is a gift of $50,000, which automatically puts them into that naming opportunity category because 50,000 and above would allow for them to sign the project. But then it's also that they are a part of the golf outing as the lead sponsors. Tournament sponsorship at St. Mary's Hospital Foundation golf tournament. If you see that under diamond, gold, and silver, platinum would be the lead gift. So is that helpful? This was an organization that was kind of combining their golf tournament into their corporate ask that they were making, and I think that they were pretty successful in being able to have that conversation with their community in terms of, this is where we've been, this is where we're going, we understand and we're willing to listen to how important the golf tournament is for you, but in reality we need the money for this project, we don't need it for the golf outing itself. So is that helpful, Donna?
Thank you. Any other questions that anyone has?